What's up, everybody? Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz, back from my vacation, back in the saddle, and back for another week of great content here on the channel, talking about all things Big 12 this week. Brett Yormark chatting it up with reporters after some meetings going on, and he had some very interesting things to say about the current landscape of college athletics, some that could potentially be a little bit concerning if you think he may be reading too much into unanimity, uniformity, just friendliness generally between all the commissioners of the conferences right now. I do want to talk about that and Brett Yormark's comments. We've got a potential $1 billion break for all of the Power 5 schools from the NCAA as it relates to the House lawsuit, which has obviously made a bunch of headlines, some of which occurred at the beginning of the week right before I did leave. But we're going to start today with ESPN potentially having some secrets exposed, at least in the courtroom. Now, whether or not that eventually means that they will become public could be another story, but at least in the courtroom, ESPN is going to have to delve into some of the secrets that they have. Documents with the ACC are going to be put out there in court for everybody in that case involved, at least to see. And we know that that has been something ESPN has been very, very sensitive about, going back to when initially it was discovered through the court battle with Florida State that they actually have a look in, basically, an option to terminate the ACC television contract about 9 years before the deal actually ends. So there is a lot going on. There is a lot to chat about. I will field any and all of your questions about it. You guys know how it works. If you have been here before, just like Andre, who has already submitted a super chat, you can do the same by clicking the $ below the chat box. In order to do so, that will attach a donation to your chat, pin it in a separate column, ensures that you make it on the show here tonight, lets you get your voice out there. You can control the content on the show and support the work that I'm doing to bring you conference realignment, college football, and college basketball content on this channel all the time. So appreciate genuinely everybody who helps pitch in there. It is much, much, much appreciated. And I couldn't do it without all of you guys. So thank you so much, everybody who does do that. But there's an easy way to support the channel as well that is totally free. That is just by giving me one click. If you like the video, that is much appreciated as well. Just click that like button. Helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you keep the comments flowing just in the regular chat, that also helps. And if you comment underneath the video in the comment section, that helps as well. All of that stuff is great and helps keep that algorithm going and adds to the views on these videos. So love and appreciate each and every one of you guys who does do that as well. Also, if you're not watching this live, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is a way that you can contribute to the channel and leave a question or comment. And if you do that, I will ensure that I read it on the beginning of the next show. So you will still be a part of the conversation. You can get your question or comment in there. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo to do that. Don't think I've checked that. Let me actually check that real quick here before we get rolling to make sure there wasn't anything this week. I don't believe that there was, but I care about you guys. I want to make sure. And no, we did not have anything this week. So John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to go that route. Love that we've got a tortious interference reference already in the chat today. That's how you know it's going to be a good show. When referencing good old Bob Bowlesby and the tortious interference claims. What a time to be alive that was. Andre, I appreciate your support of the channel, my friend. Andre chiming in here just with a super chat, not seeing anything else attached to it, Andre. So if I'm missing anything, let me know, but I genuinely support your support of the channel. Genuinely support. I mean, obviously I support your support of the channel, but I genuinely appreciate your support of the channel, my friend. Thank you for being here, and thank you for chipping in today. Anyone else wants to be like Andre? Click that $ below the chat box. What's up, Stripes? I see Stripes in here, and shorts all year, sensational. Alex, Ron, Cactus. Good old Cactus beating everybody to the punch today, getting in first. And how about this? Love it. Michael Dehart, thank you for being in here. Michael Dehart, good evening, Big John. I like that. Big John, you guys are free to call me Big John if you want. Let's go Mountaineers. Let's go Big 12. All right. Little West Virginia love from Michael Dehart. Thank you for being here, Michael. Appreciate you, man. Pretty sure I went to high school with a Mike Dehart. I'm guessing there's not crossover there because I don't know that he was a West Virginia fan, but that's one of those names that I saw and I was like, man, I haven't heard that one in a while. But thank you for your generosity, Michael, and for being in here, for supporting the channel, for supporting the Mountaineers, for supporting the Big 12, man. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. You guys ready for the crosshairs to be on ESPN? Perhaps a South Carolina court has ordered the ACC to turn over documents about its agreements with ESPN that Clemson has requested in its lawsuit against the conference. Now, a lot has happened on the Clemson lawsuit front. That's where the action has been heating up, as opposed to the Florida State side of things within the last week, because not only do we have this story, but we've got Clemson going full Florida man, Florida State on this thing, and not only demanding that they be let out of all the shackles that the ACC has put on them with the grant of rights and an exit fee, but they think the ACC should be paying them. They think the ACC should be paying them damages. That's where South Carolina is at on this thing right now. But before we get to that, I do think this is fairly significant because I want to see how this ends up playing out. That a South Carolina court has ordered the ACC to turn over documents about its agreements with ESPN that Clemson has requested in its lawsuit against the conference. The interim confidentiality order was released on Friday. It said the ACC has 7 days to produce unredacted documents about its TV deal with ESPN to Clemson. Now, if you just stop right there, that seems like, oh boy, this is going to get juicy. All right. ESPN has not wanted this stuff out there at all. They were super upset when Florida State exposed some of the secrets that we already did not know about their agreement with the ACC. They do not want anything else out here. They say it's trade secrets, whatever, proprietary information that they think could help competitors. I suppose the general idea with that. I don't know, man. They reacted so viscerally to that happening the first time. It really makes you wonder what is in those documents that they really, truly do not want out there. Is there something more nefarious than that, a la tortious interference? I mean, I don't think it would be specifically that, but something along those types of lines, right? Would it be something that is that nefarious? We shall see. Or maybe we won't, because the order, the next sentence in the story says, the order also provides safeguards to keep the requested documents from being released publicly. So the court is saying, look, you got to cough this up for the sake of the suit. It's relevant. It's important in the lawsuit, but we're going to keep it from going public. We're going to keep it from getting out there to those nasty reporters, to Twitter. We're going to keep it, at least for now, from getting out there. But that's, to me, it just makes me wonder, like, is there another step where it could actually get out there? Is that the be-all, end-all? Will the safeguards actually work? The article goes on to say the order bars Clemson, a public university, from complying with any Freedom of Information Act requests unless the ACC gives written permission or the school is forced to do so by another court with competent jurisdiction. So that still leaves that part open. Okay. Freedom of Information Act would be a reporter coming in and saying, hey, Freedom of Information Act, I should be able to see these documents. Like, Clemson is involved in this lawsuit. These are documents that are out there. I should be able to see these documents. The court is saying, we're going to block that. You don't have to comply with that. You will not have to turn over these documents from ESPN if a nasty reporter comes sniffing around trying to FOIA that thing with a Freedom of Information Act request. They're stopping that, which is a bummer, because I would really like to see that, as I think most people would. That would be great. Unfortunately, we are not going to. But it may not be totally over if, I mean, obviously the ACC is not going to give written permission, so part 2 of that is not going to come through. But if they would be forced to give up information over a Freedom of Information Act request by another court with competent jurisdiction, that could be a different story. And I take that also back to just, hey, there's another case, there's another battle going on here in Florida, and there is a battle going on in North Carolina. There are 3 states where battles are going on through 4 different cases. So this is just one case, and we've at least seen here that one court has been willing to say, hey, look, these are going to be relevant enough that you need to produce these. So that it has piqued my curiosity anyway as to whether or not we will see another court not put as many safeguards on this. This is where I have to give you the caveat that I am very much not somebody that understands how the courts typically work. I'm not a court reporter. I am far from even Matt Baker of the Tampa Bay Times, who's a college football reporter that you've seen on this channel, who has been covering this inside and out and doing an excellent job of it. He's a college football guy, but he's having to read all these legalese documents and break it all down and try and make it digestible for everybody. I'm not even that. So I don't know. And he kind of downplayed this like, hey, look, I saw his tweet and just a little graph about it that he updated on his blog that was just sort of like, hey, I wouldn't get too worked up over this because they are going to put these safeguards in to keep it from getting out to the public. But does this set some sort of precedent? And does the a friendlier court potentially in Florida, friendlier to the plaintiffs here being Florida State there, would they opt to not put the same sort of safeguards on it? I know Matt Baker has done a lot of writing on the differences between the two states, and that's why, in large part, Florida State is wanting to keep it in Florida. They feel like they could get a more beneficial ruling on a lot of things for them. Is there a way that this comes out somewhere else if courts are already determining that it's something that can be relevant to the proceedings in all of this? So there's something to keep my eye on, because I think one thing we can all agree on, right? Could we pretty much all agree on this? I say that maybe SEC fans would say, no, look, we want to protect the great ESPN that has done so right by us and helped vault us into the position that we're in as the dominant, preeminent force in college football. I would not want ESPN to take any. I think like literally everybody else, at least in the college football world, would love to see ESPN with their pants down at their ankles and some of these documents out there and figure out what it is that they are wanting to hide so badly in these docs. Like, who really truly likes ESPN and the role that they're playing in college football? And that is the case and the plea that I would make to even SEC fans here. SEC fans, you may like ESPN. They may be your dance partner now in terms of the major TV contract and all of that stuff. But you can't be happy with what ESPN has done to the overall state of the game. You can't be legitimately happy about that, what it's doing to the long-term health of college football, even as you control the power so predominantly right now in the sport. Like, you have your grip on the sport as much as you do. It's not going to be a good thing long term. Can we just get after ESPN a little bit here and needle them and get these documents out there? I feel like that should be a unifying force for most people. Certainly, it is something that I would very much like to see. The article goes on to say, Clemson sued the ACC in March, filed in South Carolina, and claimed the ACC's $140 million exit fee is, quote, unconscionably high and unenforceable. The school also says the grant of rights only applies if Clemson is part of the conference, and that if a school exits the league, it retains control of the media rights to its home sporting events. The grant of rights argument there from Clemson, I have to giggle a little bit. You'll excuse me. I mean, I'm kind of halfway rooting for the schools here, but you'll have to humor me a bit when I laugh at like Clemson's argument being like, hey, this grant of rights that is there to keep us from leaving the conference only applies if we're actually in the conference. So if we just leave, that's null and void, when the entire point of it is to keep you in the conference. It's just crazy the way they've been doing this, but they're trying their damnedest, man. And we're not even to the craziest of the Clemson stuff yet on the show tonight. An amended, well, here it is. We're going to lead into it with the end of this first article. An amended Clemson complaint released by the court asked the ACC for unspecified punitive damages for the league's willful and malicious conduct for its assertion that it should receive TV revenue from Tigers games, even if they were a part of another conference. It is willful and malicious conduct, basically, for the ACC to try and enforce this grant of rights that they say shouldn't apply if they're not in the conference and if they have left. Ballsy stuff here from the Clemson Tigers. Florida State was the first ACC member to sue the league in December. I mean, think about that, man. Like, I have talked to you guys ad nauseum about like Florida State's strategy, best I can tell. And I know that there's, legal implications to this that I wouldn't totally understand. But from what I can grasp of it, it's basically like Florida State just being like, we're going to sling stuff around everywhere. Like we're getting down and dirty. We're going to talk about your old commissioner and nepotism claims that we have over the Raycom Sports deal. We are going to do everything that we can to get you sprinting around everywhere, looking at all these different fires that we're creating and crazy arguments that we're making. And we're just going to see what sticks. I mean, ultimately, it's just throwing it all at the wall. We'll see what stays up there and we'll see what doesn't. And now Clemson seems to be doing that too. Clemson seemed to be a bit more measured as a party in all of this. Now it feels like Clemson is going a little bit further into it and getting picking up the Florida State vibes. I mean, they're basically picking up the Florida State vibes and piggybacking off of this. And naturally, I think that makes sense that this would happen. Both schools are going to be watching the strategies of the other, seeing how this goes. I'm sure North Carolina is also watching and trying to calculate what their next move is going to be in all of this as well. But you might as well see what your compadres are doing and how exactly that is working. David, what's going on, David? David says, I just wonder if ESPN gets tired of this and announces they will not re-up the ACC contract. Yeah, which is, I mean, the ACC out in the contract. Let me see. Or ESPN out in ACC contract. So they could decline the option from 2027 to 2036. I guess the way that I view it at this point, and I know that deadline is coming up. Let's see if this has the specific deadline for it, because they would decide it before actually 2027. The problem with that is I understand how you're saying, hey, we're getting a little bit sick of this, but they're getting it for pretty cheap, right? It's a really good deal. That's a very ESPN friendly deal for the ACC. And that's why Florida State and Clemson, North Carolina, these other schools are so upset about it, is because they're like, look, you guys are getting us too much on the cheap here. We're in trouble. So it's a really ESPN friendly deal in an era where live sports does still matter, even if some of the crazy money is drying up. But I think I'm looking at this article from March and it's saying 11 months. 11 months from March. So that would put us at February? I guess in February, they would have to make the decision of that. We'll see what happens with the court cases before then, because this could all just be blowing up and falling apart by the time ESPN even has to make that decision. ESPN reportedly has until next February to decide whether or not to pick up its option with the ACC. So I suppose that's out there as a possibility. I would still think if you're ESPN, you're like, look, we'll ride this thing into the ground. It's probably not going to last too terribly long anyway, based on the fact that there are these lawsuits out there, and we've got to see what's going to happen with that. Let's just ride it out for now when it's pretty cheap and it still is live inventory for us, which is something that really matters in the world of college sports. But it's a valid point that you bring up, David, and I'm glad you did, so that we could go dive into that and get the February, be reminded of the February deadline that is coming up there for that. Al, I agree. It definitely a sweetheart deal. Hiking Cat, what's up, Hiking Cat? Didn't the ACC basically cut and paste the Big 12 grant of rights? Could this void ours? I remember there being some talk about that, the overlap on grant of rights. That is another thing I may have to try and Google here real quick. I apologize. I have like a million tabs open, and my computer is running quite slow, so I'm going to need to try to fix that before the next time I go live. But let's see. Big 12 ACC grant of rights similarities. The ACC modeled its version entirely off the Big. That's a good memory. This is from May of last year, almost a year ago. Inside the Big 12's ironclad grant of rights contract that helped keep the ACC together amid turbulence. This was a Dennis Dodd CBS Sports article from last year. A decade or so ago, the Big 12 and ACC were having discussions about playing future non-con games against one another. Nothing as radical as realignment, but enough that the Big 12 gave the ACC. The Big 12 gave the ACC access to the league's most significant legal tool, its grant of rights. The grant of rights contract signed by the schools was really grant the rights. So That's an interesting point that you make, Hiking Cat. I don't think it would like void it right away, but it would certainly set some legal precedent that if there was somebody from the Big 12 that wanted to go sue and try and get out of the grant of rights, perhaps they could based on that precedent. Now, again, you're still talking about different states. So if it were to occur in South Carolina, if it were to occur in Florida, I don't know if that would play the same in, say, Kansas or Oklahoma. If it's like an Oklahoma State, a Kansas, somebody like that trying to get out of the grant of rights, I don't know. I don't know if that would automatically mean that, but it would certainly open you up potentially to be vulnerable there. I think based on that logic. And again, no legal expert. I am a mere former college football radio host and reporter now turned YouTube and podcast host. So I don't have intimate knowledge on the legal precedent there, but it would stand to reason, yes, that you would be vulnerable there. I think that the thing for the Big 12 schools would still be you'd have to have some interest from somewhere else, right? You'd still have to have a party, being the Big 10 or the SEC, interested in bringing you in. And right now, there seems to even be debate about whether or not there's a healthy market for them to bring in Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, like schools like that right now. Would they be additive enough? I guess I should stop that at Florida State and Clemson. North Carolina, I think, is probably a no-brainer there. But if Florida State and North Carolina are question marks, I'm not sure that anybody in the Big 12 has any sort of argument to say that they would have that kind of interest there. But yes, it's a good point. You guys rest. If you want to join the action, click the $ below the chat box in order to submit your donation. Make it a super chat, which will get you on the show. Assures that, pins it in a separate column for me, and you will be rocking and rolling on the show, sharing your opinion, directing the content, and supporting the work I'm doing to bring you college football, conference realignment, and college basketball content here on the channel. Appreciate all of you guys. If you could like the video, would definitely appreciate that too. Totally free way to support the channel. Keep the comments coming, and comment underneath the video after it is done as well. That is always much appreciated. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you are not watching this live, you can also contribute to the channel there and leave your question or comment there, and I will read it to kick off the next show, so you can still be a part of the action. R-Web, what's up, R-Web? Great to see you, my friend. Says, I think the key difference between the ACC versus Big 12 grant of rights situation is the ESPN 2027 void option. As far as we know, there is no ESPN Big 12 void option. Yeah, as far as we know, although I must have to admit, now that we know that ESPN has been as prickly as it has been about the details getting out in the ACC thing, I don't know. Maybe they have some more of these sorts of things that we don't really know about within some of the contracts. But that is a fair point that you make there. It is a little bit different if you don't, because if you're arguing this in court too, I mean, you could be looking at it saying, well, look, ESPN has the option to bail on this thing with 9 years still left on the back end of it. That should be, maybe that's leverage to get out of whatever the payment is going to be for the back 9 years of that thing. That can complicate matters and make it a little more advantageous, I suppose, potentially for like Florida State and Clemson in this situation. And yes, as far as we know, there is no kill switch on the Big 12 deal. Hopefully not for those of us in Big 12 country on that. But appreciate it, R-Web. And always great to see you here. Always great to have you on top of everything. I mentioned we led into the Clemson kind of cranking up the heat on the ACC. Well, here's what we got. They are, and again, to me, when I say going like full Florida State, this feels to me like very much full Florida State. Clemson has turned up the heat on its lawsuit against the ACC, litigation that also affects Florida State's future in the ACC. The Tigers are now seeking punitive damages to Clemson for the ACC's willful and malicious conduct, including slander of title. The ACC has been slandering Clemson all of these years. It is ridiculous. We've all been saying it, right? They have been slandering Clemson, and Clemson is well within their rights to demand money out of the Atlantic Coast Conference for this. The request is part of an amended complaint filed last month in Pickens County, South Carolina, but made public this past Thursday. So we found out about it on Thursday after it had been made public weeks before that. The Tigers, like Florida State, are involved in dueling lawsuits with the ACC, playing out in their respective home states, plus North Carolina, where the conference is headquartered. Many of the arguments have been the same. Both Clemson and Florida State want guidance from home courts about how enforceable a $130 million exit fee is to leave the league. They also seek clarity on who owns the TV rights to their home games if and when they join another conference. Yeah, but Clemson's tactics, as the article points out, have generally been milder than the ones used by Florida State. But the Tigers have ramped things up by requesting damages from the ACC, a point that wasn't included in the school's initial March complaint. It seemed wild enough that they were already saying, we shouldn't have to pay any of this stuff. These documents that we signed, these contracts that we signed that appear to be pretty legally binding, and yes, to the point of the grant of rights and the Big 12 story that I just pulled up from Dennis Dodd, the word used there was ironclad, that these things are supposed to be pretty ironclad, that you all signed, you all agreed to. Not only should we not have to pay for that, but you guys have screwed this thing up so much that you should have to pay us. You should have to pay us. We're not paying you a dime. You're going to pay us to leave. You know what? We're going to leave. We're going to walk on over to the SEC. We're going to make way more money, and you're going to kick in a little cash on our way out the door. You're going to give us some spending money to take on the road with us so that we can hit up a gas station and grab some snacks on the way out the door. I mean, it's crazy, but that's what Clemson is saying here. And if you're curious as to like a little bit more in the weeds, like the details about how exactly they're trying to pitch this, Clemson's argument centers on the interpretation of grant of rights. That's the contract where schools like Florida State and Clemson give or grant their TV rights to the conference to sell. The ACC sold them to ESPN, and the league then doles out the money to FSU, Clemson, and its peers. According to the ACC, the conference owns those TV rights until 2036, even if the Seminoles and Tigers are no longer in the ACC. The schools disagree. Clemson took the disagreement to another level in its updated complaint. The school said the conference knew its claims were false or acted with reckless disregard to their truth. So again, playing off this argument that they seem to be rolling with, that's, look, if we're not in the conference, you can't enforce the grant of rights. That's only there for schools in the conference, which again seems ridiculous because the whole point is we own the rights to your home games, even if you leave. And they're saying, well, if we leave, we're not in the conference anymore, so we're not under this jurisdiction. That seems like a tough argument to sell, but they're saying the conference knew that this was false. The conference has been rolling with this. And because they have put that out there publicly, it hurts Clemson's, this is where I'm going to start paraphrasing, but because they have put that out there publicly, this grant of rights is legally binding, it has hurt Clemson's ability to go join another conference because these other leagues are looking at it like, well, Clemson's going to have to still, like the ACC would still own the rights to their home games. So that makes them less attractive to us. It's harder for Clemson to get into the SEC because the mean old ACC has the gall to hold them to the contract that they signed, this grant of rights that they signed. That seems to be basically Clemson's argument. So you owe us damages because not only are you holding us hostage, but you're making it less appealing for the SEC or Big Ten, I suppose, to come poach us, to come pick us up and allow us to play there. Here's how the article framed it. Specifically, the school said the conference knew its claims were false or acted with reckless disregard to their truth. The effect of that malintent, and that's in quotes, malintent, the suit said, was to harm Clemson and deter its exit from the conference by, among other means, seeking to diminish the value of Clemson's intangible property. They are diminishing the value of Clemson's intangible property, those TV rights for the home games. KG10, I love it. The ACC, the anti-Clemson conference. You know, we've all been saying that for so long, Clemson. The ACC has just been working against you, man. Imagine what Dabo could be if he didn't have the mean old ACC holding them down. The anti-Clemson conference. That is so good. The anti-Clemson conference. The dispute over who owns future TV rights affects hundreds of millions of dollars in future revenue for Clemson and Florida State, and any conference either school would join if they leave the league. Why would the Big Ten or SEC want either program if the TV money from their home games continues to go to the ACC? Yeah. Why would they? Well, why the hell would you sign it then, Clemson? Why would you sign it? It's just wild. This is so brash. I don't understand how I get the argument that's being made. I don't know how that would actually hold up in court. I don't know how anybody would actually buy that. I would imagine the ultimate goal here for basically everybody is to try to settle. So again, you throw all this stuff out there, you keep the ACC having to go defend, even if they're ridiculous claims, more ridiculous claims after more ridiculous claims. You get tired of it. We already had the question asked earlier, would ESPN just get sick of this and cut the contract in February when they have that option? Well, that's kind of the idea here. The ACC is just going to get sick of this. Like, you guys are making so many ridiculous arguments, and it's like whack-a-mole having to try and run around and knock these down. So just settle with us. Just settle with us. We'll take a bunch of money off the hook. That's why you spray and pray, see what sticks when you're throwing stuff to the wall. It feels like with these schools here in these lawsuits. Quote, as a result of the ACC's misstatements, the value of Clemson's media rights has been diminished in the eyes of these and other third parties, Clemson suit said. The diminution in value injures Clemson, impedes its ability to negotiate future media rights agreements, and worsens its negotiating position with potential future collaborators. Yeah, that's the point of the grant of rights, is that it hurts your ability to negotiate a place for you to jump and bail on the conference. That is kind of the idea. So I do appreciate Clemson's legal team for explaining to us the entire point of the grant of rights and how exactly it is supposed to work. Pretty good stuff there. Clemson also asked the South Carolina court to weigh in on its sovereign immunity and whether the public school can be sued in another state. So Clemson's trying to pursue all angles to get a little help, get by with a little help from their friends in their home state. So that's what's going on in the ACC. It's getting more crazy. And as Richard, it looks like it was Richard that pointed it out in the comments. Yeah, I mean, Florida State probably is looking at this like, we should do this too. We're kind of playing off of each other right now. Clemson said, hey, it's time to really jump into the deep end here and take this to another level. Florida State's probably going to be like, yeah, why not? Let's do it too. Let's continue to put the pressure on. You know, if Clemson's doing it, we should be too. I would imagine that is a likely outcome here. Okay, let's talk to David. Appreciate you, David, as always. David says Doug Rohan PC has stated that the ACC left out some items that are found in the Big 12 contract, like listing the conference home office location as the state that handles all lawsuits. Double fries, no slaw. All right, well, I'm going to have to do a little searching here. Okay, so the main idea here, David, I greatly appreciate your support of the channel, my friend. Main idea here would be the ACC apparently has left out some items that were found in the Big 12 grant of rights, like we talked about earlier. It was deemed that the Big 12's grant of rights was ironclad. They let the ACC look at it. The ACC took a lot of what the Big 12 did there, but maybe not everything, including not listing the conference home office location as the state that handles all lawsuits. Well, which would be a problem that they're facing right now because they're having to chase down lawsuits in the state of Florida and in the state of South Carolina. Okay, so Doug Rohan appears. He is an attorney. I'm seeing Rohan Law in Atlanta. Rohan Law on Twitter. Is this a guy that's been tweeting about it? I will have to go follow him. It does appear that he has been tweeting about it, although his latest tweets are about the Kentucky Derby. So I'd have to look into that closer. Boy, but I see his header on Twitter sure looks like he's a guy that's pretty involved with the Florida State stuff, like Florida State colors, court updates, transfer portal, high school. Okay. All right. Well, that's good info to know. Good info to know. I will start following him and see what he has to say about that. Maybe we can get him on. Some legal opinions about what's going on here. Some legal insight would be great. So I appreciate that, David. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will look into Doug and what he has to say about it. And if true, that is something that could be giving the ACC some trouble here, as opposed to what the Big 12 would potentially be dealing with in a scenario like this. Although, again, the ACC's worst problem in all of this is just that they have 3, maybe 4 brands in their conference that are more desired on a national scale than anybody in the Big 12 is right now. So that's the thing. May not matter for the Big 12, but it certainly matters for the ACC here that they don't have it quite as locked down as they should. So thank you for pointing that out, David. Always here for more insight on that stuff and a little bit more information. So I'm glad to be able to put that name down on my follow list. Thank you, David. If you want to be a part of the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box in order to do so. It will create a super chat, pins it in a separate column for me, and guarantees that you make it on the show here tonight. If you could like the video, I would really appreciate that as well. Totally free, easy way to do it. We've got 217 people in here now, so it would be great if you guys could all like the video. Totally free, one click, easy way to support. Leave comments in the comment section, live in the video, underneath the video as well after it is done. And it's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to contribute and you are not watching live. Leave your question or comment there, and I will make it a part of the next show as well. Okay, so now we're here at a point where we may have a $1 billion break for Power 5 schools. This is all related to the House lawsuit. Now, earlier this week, read you a story. It had been reported by multiple people, including Ross Dellinger, that the idea was going to be moving forward if there was a revenue sharing plan that looks like the one that seems to be discussed right now as a potential settlement in the House case, that would allow schools to pay up to around $20 million to the student athletes at their schools. And when it says up to, it's, look, how much do you guys want to offer? It would be a recruiting advantage to offer, obviously, more money to your players. How much do you want to offer here? But one thing that had been talked about, and I'd always just assumed the back pay part of this, because there's 2 parts. One, it's a class action lawsuit. So there are all these student athletes that say, we have lost money over the years from not getting NIL payments. You're going to need to reimburse us for that. That's the point of the class action lawsuit, right? So the class action piece of it is you're going to have to pay everybody who's a part of this complaint. There's also we want to settle this. We want to not be vulnerable to future lawsuits and other suits that are going right now. We just want to nip this in the bud. What do you need us to do moving forward to compensate the athletes fairly under the law so that we don't have to worry about this? That's the other piece. I had always assumed that both would have to be paid by the schools, but now that may not be actually the case, because I'm going to read to you here this article that says the NCAA's national office might be footing the bill for a settlement expected to be more than $2.7 billion in the landmark House versus NCAA lawsuit and other related antitrust cases, in hopes of reshaping and stabilizing the college sports industry. This is an ESPN article, by the way. Sources told ESPN on Thursday. This is a good old Pete Thamel article. So the NCAA's national office might be footing the bill for that $2.7 billion potential settlement in the House versus NCAA lawsuit. Sources told ESPN this week that parties have proposed the NCAA's national office, rather than its individual member schools or conferences, would pay for the settlement of past damages over a period of 10 years. The NCAA payments would be paid to former college athletes who say they were illegally prevented from making money by selling the rights to their name, image, and likeness. 10-year period, $2.7 billion. That's a pretty hefty price tag for the NCAA. But honestly, like, I see that and think, I mean, look, I understand there were individuals at some of these Power 5 schools who were a part of being stubborn, putting their foot down and never giving in, and just allowing athletes to be slowly paid over time, like work in some ways for them to be paid instead of just refusing, and the dam breaks and it gets all crazy. But the NCAA is obviously at the forefront of that. And they were the agency that really stopped that over the years and was never forward thinking about anything. And they're a huge, the main part of the reason that they're in the position that they're in. So make them foot the bill. I mean, I love it from that standpoint. I'm totally cool with it. The settlement would come with a corresponding commitment from conferences and schools to share revenues with athletes moving forward, sources said. And regardless of whether or not the schools are footing the bill for the back pay, which it appears they won't, that was always going to be the bigger piece of this, the more consequential piece of this to what's going to happen is like moving forward, how much are you going to have to pay every year? Because now the Big Ten and the SEC are going to have an extra $20 to $40 million on you. If you're in the Big 12 or the ACC, that makes it a lot easier for them to be paying this money to the student athletes than you. The settlement would establish a framework for power conferences to share revenue with their athletes in the future. Sources have told ESPN that schools are anticipating a ceiling of nearly $20 million per year for athlete revenue share moving forward. That figure, so they came up with that figure from a formula that's expected to be, per sources, 22% of a revenue metric that's still being discussed, which is set up to be based on various revenue buckets. It would be up to the schools to share that much. The dollar value and timing, sources cautioned, is not set and could change due to the myriad of variables involved in the case. You love this. This is kind of covering the bases on this. We always get these sorts of notes in the stories. It's like, hey, basically the number seems to be $20 million per year, but as always, it's not finalized. Something could change, so we got to be careful and cover our butts by saying that actually it may not be that. Who knows? But $20 million per year for athlete revenue sharing moving forward. Steve Berman, who is the co-lead counsel for the plaintiffs, told ESPN he believes the House case is the difference maker after more than a decade of legal battles chipping away at NCAA rules. And I don't think you're going to find much of anybody who would disagree with that. This has long been positioned as the case that was going to be, I would say, the straw that broke the camel's back, but it feels like that's even making it seem too weak. It's a little bit more than a straw, man. Like the anvil that broke the camel's back here. Berman declined to comment on the specifics of the ongoing settlement talks, but said the plaintiff's leverage is growing as the case moves closer to trial. Quote, "Our leverage is a big cannonball rolling down a hill and picking up speed," Berman said. "The longer they wait, the more they're going to have to pay. It's that simple." So that's a confident guy. The legal counsel of the plaintiffs seems quite confident in this instance that they're going to be able to really put the hammer down on the NCAA here, and that hey, if they wait longer, that figure could grow higher than $2.7 billion as far as what they're going to have to pay. Interestingly enough, would you be shocked to find out the NCAA declined to comment for this ESPN story? Since a bunch of college sports and NCAA officials met plaintiffs' attorneys at the Hyatt Regency at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on April 25th, details for potentially settling the House case have begun to be distributed to campuses. So that's a part of how you know this is moving forward. Campuses are starting to get details on what this may look like so they can prepare themselves. Not that if you are a Big 12 or ACC school, there's a great way to really prepare yourself for the ramifications of what this could mean, but you do as much as you can, right? And Thamel says, after interviews with more than a dozen college officials, industry sources, and lawyers this week, ESPN has learned that many crucial details for a settlement remain unsolved, but both sides are making progress toward a deal that could serve as a catalyst for the new business model of college sports. So they're working towards it. Quote, "They've got stuff on paper," said an industry source. "This is not just lawyers and commissioners meeting and having a cocktail. The snowball is moving downhill. The horizon on this is about a month. So we may have this done within a month." That's a strong statement. Like within a month, we could know the revenue sharing model is this. You are going to have to, if you want to play with the big boys, you're going to have to pay $20 million per year to your athletes or you'll be behind. That to me is the real significance of it. And yes, obviously it's great. Some of the money going to the athletes. But to me, this is where the separation would really start to become a tougher reality for everybody involved here in where Power 4 FBS athletics is going. I also laugh, when you say, hey, it's not just lawyers and commissioners meeting and having a cocktail. To me, I always thought of writing the agreement for the alliance on a cocktail napkin. This isn't the alliance. This is not the alliance. Like, these are serious talks, okay? We better treat this seriously. Plaintiffs in the House case argue the NCAA is breaking the law by placing restrictions on NIL. We're talking about the settlement being $2.7 billion that the NCAA would be covering here. If they were to lose the case at trial, it could owe more than $4 billion. So that is a settlement. Still a very hefty price tag, but it does beat $4 billion for all of those guys. Along with saving money, the NCAA is also motivated to settle in hopes of laying the groundwork for a system that could help them avoid future litigation. A settlement alone might not provide that protection without additional help from Congress. Yeah, that's another piece of this too. There's always been this talk of like Congress stepping in to help so that there could not be more cases on top of this, because that's the NCAA and the school's goal is like, look, this is a major pain. Let's settle. You tell us what we need to do so that we can stop having to do this and fight cases all the time. We're exhausted. You win. We're throwing our hands up. Tell us what we got to do. Let's negotiate that deal so that we can just be done with this. Earlier this month, the plaintiffs filed a motion for summary judgment, which asked the judge in the case to rule on several key arguments prior to trial. The hearing for summary judgment is scheduled for September, and a ruling in the plaintiff's favor could continue to increase their leverage in a negotiation. So I guess they don't want to get to September. We're talking about this getting done within the next month, which would be June, obviously well ahead of September, not wanting to let the plaintiffs have even more leverage if the judge were to rule on some of the key parts of the case. One outstanding issue in the potential settlement of the House case is whether a settlement would eliminate future antitrust laws against the NCAA and its schools. Industry source told ESPN, quote, "I'm very concerned about the fact that a settlement is really not a settlement. It doesn't have enough protections. If it were an all-encompassing settlement with congressional approval, I'd feel a lot better." That's why they want Congress in there. They want Congress to guarantee that they won't have to deal with anything else. College sports leaders have already been asking Congress to write a new federal law for several years that would, among other things, protect them from future litigation. We've heard about that. There have been some politicians that have talked about it. There have been some political meetings regarding this. I've always been pessimistic about that happening because, I mean, if you just look at what happens with Congress these days, they don't seem to get much of anything done, and it's hard to get them to agree on anything to like legitimately put something into place, and they've got a lot to worry about, and it's an election year. There just seems to be a lot of resistance that would make that difficult. I don't know how likely it actually is. I understand that they want it. That may be kind of an apple pie in the sky hope sort of a deal right now as to whether or not that would happen. Sources told ESPN that some school officials are hoping a House settlement could spur action on Capitol Hill. Several members of Congress who have worked on college sports-related legislation in recent years declined to comment on what impact the settlement might have on the creation of a new federal law. So it doesn't seem like we're getting a ton of info there. But here's another quote from an industry source. Quote, "You can't just settle the lawsuits. You've got to be able to emerge with something in return other than the settlement. If you don't have the requisite ability to structure the future, all we're going to do is shake hands and wait 5 minutes for the next filing. You don't want to be waiting for the next lawsuit here." So there does seem to be a pretty strong thought that if you don't get anything more ironclad than just settling this with some congressional help, this really could just be something that you do on a regular basis, and you're going to keep getting sued and you're going to keep having issues. That's why they would appreciate that help. But I know it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to take in. I think to me, the key takeaways for you at this point are this is moving. They're talking about it being potentially wrapped up in a month. And as a college sports fan, I don't think you really care, to be honest, if the NCAA is going to have to pay $2.7 billion. Who cares? That's not money coming from my school. That's an entity that should be most at fault for this anyway, in the position that everybody's in. I don't care. What I care about is what does this mean for my school? And if within a month we've got a legitimate like revenue sharing agreement, that's where you'll start to see the haves and the have-nots, I think, separate a little bit more once that comes into play. And I've said it already here in this video. I've said it over and over again. I think you guys understand where I'm getting at with that. So that would be the Cliff Notes takeaway of what seems to be going on with the House case right now in college athletics. But we are in a wild time. We're in a wild time, my friends, where this is moving pretty hot and heavy, pretty hot and heavy. And we're going to have some major changes in the structure of college athletics and how things look here very, very soon. Okay, we'll pop into some super chats here. If you guys want to jump in, you've got 5 to 10 minutes left, I would say, in the show. If you have something, click the $ below the chat box in order to donate and attach a donation to your chat. Make it a super chat. Guarantee that you get on the channel, help control the content tonight, make your voice heard, and support the work that I'm doing to bring you this college football conference realignment, college hoops content on a regular basis on the channel. We say hello to my guy, Eddie Lozano. Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate. What's up, Eddie? Eddie says, hi, buddy. I was very impressed with the BYU Fan Fest in Frisco, Texas. As a conference, we need to reach out to new fans to improve TV viewership. I think BYU set the example. Interesting. What is this BYU Fan Fest? Dallas 2024. Welcome to BYU Fan Fest. I didn't know this was a thing, but I like this. From 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. General information. I'm just curious what happened here. Cosmo, BYU football players, BYU Sports Nation live, food trucks, BYU store. I mean, that's great. And BYU has obviously a built-in national fan base with the LDS backing that they have from the church there. So it would make a lot of sense for them to do some things like that and doing it right in the heart of Big 12 country, Big 12 offices in Frisco, the DFW area. I love that move from BYU. BYU does it the right way, man. BYU does it the right way. They know the advantages that they have there and trying to tap into that with this. I think it's very wise, very smart. And really, honestly, they're following the lead of their commissioner. I know the problem now, I was going to say, Bray Ormark's trying to take this thing to Mexico. He's going to Vegas with Media Day. He's wanting to push into the New York market as much as possible and did things like the Rucker Park experience that they had this past year, right? So he's trying to take the Big 12 into a bunch of different markets and do just that. And BYU seems to be right on the heels there. Now, not everybody can do this same thing. I don't know that there are a ton of West Virginia fans in Dallas, Texas, or K-State fans in there'd be a decent amount of K-State fans, I suppose, in Dallas, Texas, but it's not going to work for everybody. You get the point there to try and do something like that. But BYU is a very good example of it. They're first class, like the BYU TV, all of that stuff is great. I think it's tremendous for the conference, and I would echo those sentiments, Eddie. So appreciate you. If you guys need a real estate agent in San Antonio, you know who to call. Get in touch with my guy, Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. As always, appreciate that input and bringing my attention to something that I did not know had happened. David, what's going on, David? What's up, my friend? Thank you for being here. David says maybe the SEC can claim credit for payments illegally paid during those years. Funny. Yeah. The SEC can say we should not have to pay. That's a pretty good angle, David. The SEC should come out. Look, if they're going to be like Clemson, they would come out with lawyers and say, we shouldn't be on the hook for that because we were paying all this stuff under the table, man. You guys got your NIL under the table in a brown paper bag, just like God intended. Okay. Because that's how we do it here in the SEC. That's pretty good, David. I like that. Yeah, I mean, they're probably not the only ones too. I mean, hell, Clemson, who we're just talking about, I'm sure that was probably happening some at Clemson. Florida State, good Lord. Yeah, probably Florida State too. But pin that as one of the better jokes we've had in a while, David. That's good stuff. Honestly, you may just want to relay that to, you may want to relay that to their legal team. You may want to go ahead and just let the conference know about that preemptively. Although I guess the whole point of that article was that the NCAA is going to cover the tab for the old stuff. But I love it. That's great, David. Thank you very much, sir. Alan, thank you for being here. And thank you for your support of the channel. Appreciate you as always. Alan says, John, good show. Dizzy, keeping up with all the iterations by the ACC, FSU, and ESPN. Boy, I'm right there with you. And, I'm someone who's having to keep up with it on a daily basis here. But yeah, it's a lot to digest. None of us are well trained on the legal system and how this stuff is going to work. And it's new territory for everybody involved here. So believe me when I say you are far from the only one. Time to meet at the wheel and fortify ourselves for the coming Big 12 football season. All Big 12 fans, welcome, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Alan, if you organize it, I would be there. I will be there. I will show up for it. We can also do something in Manhattan before that football game this year if you're going to come for that. So you know where to find me, at JL Kurtz on Twitter. If you ever want to facilitate that, hit me up in the DMs, and we can definitely do that. I would love that. Honestly, that'd be a really cool thing if we could somehow, I guess maybe like the Big 12 basketball tournament would be perhaps the best way to do that, where you might have fans from everybody around there. It's just hard to get everybody in one place, but I love the idea of like a Big 12 fan meetup that we could do somewhere. That would be awesome. Keep that on the back burner, Alan. It's a good idea, man. But thank you, Alan. Very much appreciate your support. Very, very much, sir. Got a couple more here. Rob College Football. What's up, Rob College Football? Thanks for being here. Rob College Football says some podcast saying Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, K-State, West Virginia to the SEC eventually. Why any of them over TCU, who has been better in football than any of them? Ooh, Rob's picking off some fighting words there, probably to, Oklahoma State fans might have something to say about that. TCU has certainly achieved higher highs. They have not been as rock solid, consistent as Oklahoma State. That is for sure. Really, Rob, I think the argument that you'd be making in this scenario for TCU would be more about, yes, they have had the high highs, but it's more about we're in DFW. Like we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and we have shown the ability to win a college football playoff game. That's the argument for TCU. But I would like to know who it is specifically that you're saying has been saying that Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, K-State, and West Virginia to the SEC eventually. Nothing against any of those schools, one of which is my own. I don't see that ever happening unless we're going to 24, 26 team conferences. And that's probably what you're referencing there, I guess, is if we're going to expand this thing to like 48 teams make the top tier. It's tough. I would also think pains me to admit it, but Kansas fans, I would say Kansas, just based on their basketball, I think is going to be higher up the pecking order than probably every single one of those schools. I would think like Kansas and TCU would be at the top of the list in terms of most desirable. TCU, because it gets you the DFW market and does have a football program that's capable of winning double-digit games and has displayed that ability. In Kansas, just because they have a basketball program that would help out your basketball profile. So I just would disagree with the teams that are listed there. Probably even if we did go to like a 48 team sort of a deal, I think all that would be very long-term. And I would tell you as a TCU fan, I wouldn't really sweat it. Like if Big 12 teams are getting plucked from somewhere to be a part of Super League or however you want to phrase what the next iteration of all of this looks like, I think TCU is going to be pretty close to the top, if not at the top of the list of teams that would be most desired from the Big 12. I would say that. So wouldn't worry about it. Wouldn't sweat it, Rob. Wouldn't sweat it, Rob. I think the Frogs would be in a good place there. So thank you. Thank you, my friend. Cyclone Steve. What's going on, Cyclone Steve? Can they report their players for avoiding taxes? Is this in reference, Cyclone Steve, to like the NIL back pay? Like players that would be a part of the class action lawsuit getting NIL from that? Would they have to be paying taxes on that? I assume that they would have to be paying taxes on whatever it is that comes in from the suit. It's also not going to be a ton of money. I saw a breakdown. Wish I could remember where that was. I saw a breakdown of like, hey, here's how many athletes could claim it. How much you're going to get per athlete would depend on how many athletes step forward and become a part of this. But if the max did, it was just going to be like a couple $100 for each player. Like it was not going to be a ton. So there wouldn't be a ton of taxes on that either. If you're referencing, I'm trying to go back through everything we talked about. If that was a reference to the SEC comment and it was, hey, can you report your players who took money under the table from us back in the day when we were doing NIL as God intended it? Okay. Yeah. Cyclone Steve says in reference to paying old players under the table in the past in the SEC. Bam. Okay. Can they report their players for avoiding taxes? That'd be a hell of a move, man. That'd be a hell of a move. Like schools sometimes take flack for kind of using and then kicking out the players like, hey, come in, win football games for us. And then, we don't really care that much about your education or your future or whatever. That'd be taking it to another level. If it's like, hey, Eric Dickerson, come here. We're going to give you 8 cars. And then years after the fact, we're going to come back around and say like, hey, we gave this dude a bunch of cars. He didn't pay taxes on it. Get the government after you, man. It's pretty shady business. It's pretty shady business. But if you're going for the humor, I do enjoy that, Cyclone Steve. I do enjoy the humor of that. Okay, we're at an hour. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. But appreciate all of you guys for being here. I am going to I'll give you guys a heads up on just kind of like a programming note here. I've had this thought because I know people have in the past, like when we do these live videos, people will want the chapter markers or to be able to pull out the different parts that we talk about in each chat. So I thought, why don't I just clip the video a couple different times, like the main portions of each, and then post them separately after that during the week, so that people, if they want just a snippet of it, they weren't here for the entire live, they'd be able to watch it that way. I'm going to try that this week, see how it goes. And we'll see, play around with that and see what the results are. If that makes people a little bit happier, we'll see what happens there. So just stay tuned for that. I should be back around this week, ready to give you a live show on Wednesday. And obviously, if something big happens, you will get content on that between now and then as well. So if you could please like the video on your way out the door, that would be tremendous. It is a huge help to me. If you leave a comment in the comment section under the video after you are done, that would also be very, very helpful. Let me know what you think about all this, where things are at. Is Clemson in the right to be doing the crazy bleep that they're doing right now? Let me know in the comments. Even if you disagree, love me, hate me, any of that stuff is welcome. And spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your family about the channel, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's social media, wherever that may be. I greatly appreciate all of your support. Those of you guys who do that: Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, for now, I suppose, wherever it is that you're at, let people know about the content that I'm producing here on this channel. That would be awesome. And before we hit it, we've got Justin with the buzzer beater, the king of the buzzer beaters. Justin says the Big 12 should do something out of the box and be the first league to introduce a 4-team conference playoff. Maybe sell the rights separate from TV. Interesting. You'd have to time it up so that it would still work okay with the timing of the actual playoff. But I guess as long as it's determining a champion, maybe you could pull that off. There was the talk of the G5, like 4-team playoff. That was floated out there briefly, that had been an idea that had been discussed. So it had been discussed by a league or leagues that were left behind in terms of the top tier of college football. I'd be interested in like how much money you could actually make from that, if that would increase eyeballs, I guess, on the game. If you felt like that would increase eyeballs enough to get you better ratings than just the regular season games, and ergo be worth it from a financial standpoint. Probably have to run the numbers on that, but I'm like, as in not me, but the league would. But I'm all in on trying to get creative. That's an innovative idea. So no bad ideas here, Justin. No bad ideas. I'm willing to listen on that. Start in week 0. Oh, so you would start your entire schedule in week 0. I guess you could play a conference game then in week 0, work backwards from there. Yeah. Okay. We can workshop this, Justin. I can work with that. That's a good one. Nice buzzer beater, Justin. Appreciate you, man. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Great to be back with a live show after being gone midweek this week. Pleasure talking to you all. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night. Have a great start to your week, and I will talk to you all soon.